I've done an unusual experiment and I've been working at it for some time, which is where I use the tool that's supposed to build narratives to dismantle them. Now, what I mean by that is that I've been working with artificial intelligence for a while now, for years. And one thing is for certain, when you train it to sniff out narratives and to dismantle it, it is incredible. Okay. So what happened is that I decided that I'd take a look at one of these papers. This is a Swedish study, population level, and they found that essentially when you look at what happened in terms of the vaccination status, this was an incredible outcome for the population there. And the point is that when you think about that, it's an important issue that needs to be addressed because my question is simple. Does it fit the real world? Is this what you are seeing, what I'm seeing? I'm just straightforward clinical in the sense that if this is what is happening, I expect hospitals to be empty unless they're full of unvaccinated people. But that's not what we're seeing. So I'm going to take you through what I did, and I'm not a statistician. However, when you use the tools to do the analysis, it can be extremely powerful. So I'm going to share with you my thoughts about what was happening. Before I start, just a reminder that we have coming up shortly is our NeuroCovid conference. Look at the link below. It will be live, but for those people who want the reminder, and if you are actually on the link that we give, your questions will be more easily seen and answered. So that's the advantage. So if you want to do that, please do it. In terms of the heart issues, I recently put out a course on the COVID heart storm. If you want to understand why I'm predicting that this is a massive issue in the months and the years to come, please take a look at that. So let's this piece of information. This Swedish study was big. It's one of the population level ones, and it was looking at specific outcomes in relation to the vaccination, but only up to 6 weeks. Now, if you've recently seen me do a presentation with regards to the Japanese, they found citizens, they did a citizens inquiry, pulling a lot of data. So you can't say it's a peer-reviewed study, but they found a mortality flag at 90 to 120 days. So the normal time frame that you would look for issues would be missed if that was correct. If that was correct, it needs more research. So they would go up to 6 weeks in the context of a vaccine, and the reason is largely because in most vaccines the immune response is going to cause an issue. It will do it within that time frame. I think, however, they have underestimated the impact of the spike protein. As I said, if you don't get your pathophysiology right, you will make a bunch of mistakes. So let's go to this paper and show you what it was saying. So as I said, this here was looking at outcomes after the coronavirus or COVID-19 vaccination, looking at complications and mortality. And they did this at a population level, 8 million people in Sweden. And their results essentially showed decreased risks of cardiovascular events post-vaccination were observed, especially after dose 3. And however, there was still an increased risk of myocarditis and pericarditis, especially after the second dose. So this is what they are using to emphasize to you that if you think that there are any problems, the peer-reviewed evidence does not show it. You're imagining it, you're making up stuff. All those people you know who have had heart attacks, it's just because you're looking for it. The hospitals are not full. All of that stuff is ridiculous. Highly vaccinated regions are fine. That's what they're telling you. So My principle is that I look at the real world. And my point is that if that is the case, I have to see that corroborated in the real world with lower hospital admissions in highly vaccinated regions. And so what then comes up is a study that was done in 2022 in Israel. Now you have to remember, Israel was at the front with regards to the vaccination program. They were vaccinating before everyone else. And so they were the test case to look at what was going on. And what they then find is that in Israel here, this study comes out. Increased cardiovascular events among under 40 population in Israel during the vaccine rollout and the third COVID wave. And essentially, they found a 25% increase between January to May 2021 compared to 2019 to 2020. This fits what I've been seeing and hearing. Now, that's real world analysis. And what they were just looking at was ambulance call outs. And when you looked at the figures here, the red line represent cardiac arrest calls. These blue lines here represent the early 2020. You can see with the lockdowns, it drops down. And then here in this period here is still in 2020. That's when you had the second wave. You see a little bit of a surge, comes down again. And then these peaks represent the vaccine program, dose 1 and dose 2. And what you can see here is a rise alongside that, which then drops off after it had finished. And so you can't say this is specifically the cause, but it is a flag that you are seeing increased cardiovascular events around the time of vaccination. This does not fit the Swedish model. And that's the point. It just doesn't add up. Unless maybe the Swedes had a different kind of physiology. I don't know. So, with that in mind, here is what I then did. I just thought to myself, I'm clinical, and so I think about things in a very, very practical way. And when I looked at the charts, this is what you saw. So when you look at this, wherever you see the dotted line, that represents 0.0. Anything to the right of it is increased risk. Anything to the left is decreased risk. So you can see here, myopericarditis in weeks 1 to week 6, increased risk, which comes down. And then by week 3, you see decreased risk in terms of dose 3. And they look at multiple things, extrasystoles, atrial fibrillation. You see that incredibly, the vaccine protects against atrial fibrillation. It protects against arrhythmias. And if you go down here, it protects against myocardial infarction. Remember, anything to the left is protection. In dose 1, dose 2, dose 3, incredible. It even protects against heart failure. Wow, this is incredible. To be frank with you, if this was true, you wouldn't need any tablets anymore. You just need to just keep on vaccinating people and they'll never get sick. I'm being sarcastic here because that makes no sense. As I say to anyone who says that to me, I say, tell me the mechanism. How in the world is it going to do all those things in the first 6 weeks? That's my question. It makes no sense clinically. You'd have to explain to me the mechanism. And if it has that impact, you then have to ask the question, what happens when the impact wears off? But let me tell you what I did. Of all the things that they listed there was one thing that I was almost absolutely certain would not change in 6 weeks, and that was heart failure. Okay? Because heart failure doesn't just occur unless you've had a heart attack. But heart failure, as I predicted before, will be an issue, but not in 6 weeks, because that was when they were looking for it. And when you look carefully at this, you will notice that heart failure is to the left of the line completely. It protects against heart failure in the first 6 weeks, dose 1, dose 2, dose 3. So I know this makes no clinical sense. I don't care who who you listen to, if anybody tells you that the vaccine can protect against heart failure in the first 6 weeks of the dose, that is absolutely bonkers, especially because we know a significant proportion of people who have been vaccinated are showing strange changes in their glucose uptake in the heart in the 6 months post vaccination. So, no way, not possible. So, here's what I did. I then took the same data, okay? And so remember, I'm not a statistician. I'm just using the power that is in existence because I know how to utilize AI. So when you turn it into a statistician and you make it reanalyze the data, guess what I did? I said, let us presume that in the first 6 weeks of every dose, there was no significant impact with regards to heart failure. Because heart failure is the one thing that I know clinically is not really going to shift in that short period of time. So, what it means is that I created a new baseline. So, when you look at it here, I just pull this baseline all the way back to here and said, I know that heart failure, it's just not possible for it to get better after the vaccination. So it means that there is a bias in this research that is pushing it this way. And that means that this line needs to be pulled across this way in every single one of these things. Suddenly, it looks very different because if you pull this line across, where in effect, and you have to remember, they were using AstraZeneca as well in some of these things. You telling me that AstraZeneca, which is no longer on the market, it's associated with specific clotting, are you telling me that it protects against stuff like strokes? I mean, come on, guys. This is, by the way, I have a bridge to sell if you want to buy it, okay? Just a joke. But the point is that I then pulled it across to get a new baseline. And when I did that analysis and reanalyzed the data, it then showed something completely different. It then shows that in reality, if you do it that way, there is a 1.6 in terms of the risk of heart attack. So when you look at myocardial infarction here, it's protected all the way through. But if you pull this line across, similar to what happened with heart failure, to about the same distance, what you then find is that a significant rise in myocardial infarctions. Now, this would fit with what was happening in Israel. This is what I said. Now, that would make sense. As you do the vaccination within the 6 weeks, there is a rise here in cardiac arrest calls in Israel at the time. They didn't have a clear correlation to it, but it's a pattern. It certainly didn't go down. So, what does that mean, though? And this is the point that you then have to think about. What really does it mean if that is occurring? So when I looked at that, I just did that reanalysis. And what it means is that if that baseline is wrong, if there is a bias in the research and you have to shift the baseline across, it means that when you reanalyze the data, it is suggestive that there is a 60% increase. Now, it's not, when you say 60%, this is why I pulled this out so that you understand what that means. When you reanalyze it, suggesting that the risk of a heart attack after COVID vaccination may be up by 60% higher than expected in some groups, what it would mean is that if this was normal, the unvaccinated, you would have 10 people having a heart attack. But if it was a 60% increase, it then becomes 16 people having a heart attack. And so that's what it means in terms of that relative increase in numbers. And that would fit with the real world, especially in terms of what Israel showed us and the fact that the hospitals were still full. Hospitals were not empty. And so therefore, what we know is something doesn't fit with the data analysis. Now, you can imagine that people are going to jump all over this and say, This is peer-reviewed evidence that there's all this protection. I'm just calling out the practical stuff. As I say, I'm showing you again. If they say that, they need to explain how in the world did it cause a reduction in heart failure. It makes no sense. And so therefore, there is something wrong with the analysis and the line needs to be pulled across. Simple as. So the problem we've got at the moment is that the data seems to be wonky. And it's damaging trust in science because you're telling people to no longer see what they are seeing. They're not imagining it, that lots of people seem to be having heart attacks and collapsing and dying. It's in the news all the time. They know family, they know friends. And there is this narrative that you're imagining it. You're just looking for it. It's not real. They're all protected. You don't need to worry. If this is the kind of science we're doing, we are in trouble. So, as a final point, remember, coming up in the next few days is our NeuroCovid conference, the neurological aftermath of COVID-19. And as well, if you want to understand a little bit more about the COVID storm, please click on the link in the description and join us in this journey of knowledge. Final point, you need to remember this information they will not want anybody to see. Your job is simple. I just need you to like, I need you to subscribe, and I need you to comment, even if it's just yes or thank you. It just helps to push the algorithm further and makes it harder for them to censor this information. We've still got a long way to go because nobody wants to be accountable and nobody wants to be responsible. They're going to leave you to hold the can. Have a good evening.